Goeiedag, dit is Kleurnet. En ik ben Luc Sala en we gaan vandaag praten met Dan Winter. Dan Winter is wetenschapper, hij komt uit Amerika. En zijn gebied ligt een beetje op wat ze in Amerika fringe science noemen. Op de grens van de wetenschap. Hij onderzoekt hoe binnen en buiten, hoe vorm en inhoud met elkaar samenhangen. We gaan met hem praten in het Engels, want dat is de taal die hij spreekt. Today we're talking with a scientist who seeks the relationship between form and content, between frequencies and the human body. Someone who has endeavored to see the relationship between what we know from very long times ago, people like Plato discovered, and what happens now, between modern science and biofeedback technology and what happened just in every cell of our body. Welcome.
Thank you, Luke.
You're a scientist. Now, are you a normal scientist in the sense that you are a physicist or a mathematician, or are you working in a field that doesn't fit in what, say, university curriculum would encompass?
Well, my field is called psychophysiology, but it's really about the electrical nature of human emotion, about feeling, how feelings work and what their shape is. And that leads to questions about geometry.
The shape of feelings.
Yes.
Wait a moment. Geometry for me was in school. I made lines. Let's start there. On the chalkboard, and I made a triangle and a square and stuff like that, and then I could figure out all things. But looking at my body, there's very little geometry there. I mean, there's not a straight line in my body as far as I know, yes? People say not even in my mind.
But yet the body is comprised so much of particular ratios, particular shapes, that the distance or the proportion from the elbow to the wrist and the wrist to the knuckle, all those proportions they're actually golden mean proportions. The
golden mean, that is in Dutch, is called gulden snede. I remember that is the small to the big is as the big to the whole.
Exactly.
Yes,
right.
and that comes out to 0.6 something, eh?
0.618. Mm-hmm.
Yes. I remember that when I had to make a drawing or something or a painting, then the nanny at school would say, yeah, you have to make this division. That's where you start.
Mm-hmm, yes.
Why is that so important for us, that golden mean?
Well, people think of it as beauty, and it truly is what beauty is, yet it has a wave meaning. It has a meaning for how waves can nest well, too. So not only, it was the definition of what is beauty because it is the definition of what allows waves to stand.
Waves. Waves are in the sea, but we know now from physics that, for instance, electrons are waves. In fact, all matter is waves.
That's
so
exactly
waves
it.
is the stuff we're made of.
Exactly.
Yes?
Right. I call that the unified field idea.
We're all made of the same waves.
Yes.
But now people who study quantum physics say, yeah, wait a moment, but there is no matter, there is no waves, it's something in between. We can't touch it. It's all imaginary.
Well, I think we can get a very practical image of the difference between matter and energy and see it all as waves if we understand the definition of matter, which is merely when a wave goes in a circle, it stores a little bit of spin, and that's called inertia. It's what a gyroscope makes. And if you measure how much inertia is stored, that's the only definition any physicist has ever had for mass or matter. So in that sense, when a wave goes in a circle, we call it matter. When it goes in a line, we call it energy. Or the joke is, well, there's only two kinds of matter, matter and doesn't matter.
Anyway, so that's physics. So that in the very deep levels of our reality, you come to the point where not only are there atoms, but you go deeper in electrons, and it turns out those are electrons. And I've even heard that those electrons are superstrings, very fast-moving particles. But geometry is something that we might see in the sky. For instance, I know some star patterns that I recognize. I say, hey, that's a form I recognize. I recognize geometry in buildings. Yeah, the pyramids is a good example. Mm-hmm. Why do we build pyramids? Is that related to us, or is that just by accident?
Well, I think we should go back to what you were saying about waves, and you even mentioned superstrings and wormholes. You sort of imply string theory. And if we see that when everything is made of one substance, visualize a compressible jello, the only substance that organizes itself out of chaos, as it were, is a donut. It's a torus. And in the center of that is a little vortex or a wormhole or a song line. And so those strings, those
you're talking about a torus. Can you show that on your computer here?
Well, we have lots of pictures of toruses.
Of torus.
Only one thing they can make. It's a smoke ring. It's a donut. It's called self-organizing.
Oh, that's a good image. So you say, take a bit of smoke,
yes.
and then if you blow it and you're good at it, you create these donuts, and you see it even rolling there. Yes?
It's the only thing you can make. If the universe is made of one substance, you can only make donuts. And given that information, then nesting donuts is literally how you would make matter out of light, because you would string them along in this little glass bead game.
So you say the relationship between pure energy, movement, waves, and matter has to take a specific form.
Yes,
which resembles the donuts and what comes out of it.
The wave goes in a circle, and something sucked it into going in a circle. And because it's going in a circle, it stores some inertia, so we call that mass. Is the creator. That's the magical thing. And later we get into the nature of emotion and how it does that.
Yeah. But you, of course, now touch the beginning of everything, the creator. I mean,
yes.
You could say this whole universe is there only energy, only waves, and yet it has gotten form.
Yes. Well, and that's where we get to this idea. So you will move down to the pyramid. Then if you nest donuts in a way that their spin doesn't cancel each other out, you arrive at the Platonic solids. Just visualize your pyramid with a vortex.
Platonic solids are like a pyramid is one.
Well, a tetrahedron, octahedron. A pyramid is...
You have those because those...
Ah, yes. There's lots of movies of Platonic solids in here.
Yeah, the nice thing, you have a computer. I mean, you can show that.
We'll hit open.
Geometry, it becomes a line, and a line becomes a plane, and you make a triangle, and then you get what we saw there, not a real pyramid, but a tetrahedron.
Is they had to nest in the faces of the Platonic solids, because in those angles, all the vortex could meet in a way that their spin could add and not subtract.
Now, the funny thing is that Plato made a big difference between what is in the mind, what is non-tangible, and what is tangible. But you're talking about these forms, these Platonic forms, as really a relationship between undefined waves and matter.
Well, I mean, I'm not sure how far we want to carry this conversation, but the next step of the conversation is to discover that those vortex nested into the Platonic solids make the atomic table, make matter. All of the atoms, it's called the s, p, d, and f subshells, the electron shells. The s, p, d, f subshells are, in fact, 1, 3, 5, 7 donut pair 2, 6, 10, 14 electrons, that's the atomic table. You've cooked it up. And 1, 3, 5, 7 pairs of donuts, vortex, make the 3 is a cube, the 5, 7 is a dodecahedron and an icosahedron. So if you could nest donuts into all the platonic solids' faces, you'd have cooked up the atomic table. You'd have done your business.
Wait a moment. If I was God and I was to recreate the world, and the only thing I had was energy and waves,
and donuts,
and those
donuts,
the waves would become donuts,
yeah.
and I have to do something with the donuts to form matter, they would naturally take those places. Now I remember that because I see crystals.
Exactly.
And they have many of those forms.
Exactly. That's the point. Precisely.
Precisely. So if I go from a purely imaginary thing like God or the emanating force, whatever we call it, he wants to create something, he has to follow these rules.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yes, there's no other universe possible in our thinking.
Well, what gets interesting is then to ask the question of what sucks that compressible jello in such a way that it would be drawn into the center to make the first donut. I call it implosion. And that's what we discovered in the nature of the geometry in the heart.
Then there is this strange thing that walks around on the earth, what makes the connection? Human beings. I don't think apes think in geometrical terms or in... Yeah? And you say that the human body is also based on the same frequencies and that it comes out in the heartbeat.
That the actual, what happens is the heartbeat creates the necessary shape of these donuts.
Yeah.
Again,
let's look at it.
This picture we had up here a minute ago.
You're saying the heart beats at a certain frequency. Those frequencies can be analyzed, and you come to a certain pattern, certain proportions are there, and the golden mean comes out as an important factor. What I sense from you is that since the heart is also an emotional thing, if it goes very fast, we're probably very busy or under stress, and we were calm. But that if our heart approaches that same frequency or that golden mean proportion, we feel happy.
Well, and I want to be very clear about this because people often say, well, it's one frequency. Shouldn't we just be able to pick it out? But let me use this analogy. If you heard a little child say, Dada, and then you heard an old man say, Dada, the word ah, or the ah sound, is not a particular frequency at all. What it is, it's a ratio. Your ear picks up the fact that the the harmonics of the tongue have allowed a set of ratios. It's actually 2x, 4x, 8x. It's our octaves that are included very inclusively in the mouth, and so you have the sound ah recognizable whether it's a high frequency or a low because of the ratio between the harmonics in it.
Okay,
And
so that goes the same for the heart. But
yes,
you said something interesting. So you can measure emotions, or you can express emotions in frequency of the heart, and all this complex mathematical stuff. Now that's interesting. So happiness, take one emotion, feeling good, is related to a certain proportion of your body and your heart working. Yes?
Yes. We're actually...
Heart working is a little bit different here.
I can show you a little table here where when we plot this number...
And they talk about you feel good, and they make you fill in all kinds of lists and cross, are you feeling this and that and that, and they say, well, this guy seemingly is happy. And there are physicists, and they measure your blood and the voltages. But we're saying I can relate emotions to specific ratios, to specific things.
Yes.
Why don't we get a machine so that we all become happy by just switching this thing on?
It sounds like a little gizmo to make everyone feel bliss. Well, let's back up a little bit and look in the music literature at where the wave shapes of emotion were first defined. I have a picture on the screen here. It's from the Sentics literature, and it absolutely is ratio. And on the screen, well, we just tell the story.
So proportions are what matters, not the music. So is that why, say, a violin, which is much higher sound than, say, someone singing very deep, can have the same emotional effect?
Yes. And just to complete the thought, the touch that said joy has a maximum pressure that occurs 1/6 into the duration of the squeeze or hug or touch, whereas the touch that says love, and you can practice this. I make jokes about this all the time. But if you walk up to someone that you want to squeeze and say, I'm going to hug you, and I'd like you to tell me if you felt a tingle afterwards. You can sort of make a game of it. But the fact is, if you practice, when you squeeze someone to say you love them, you'll notice that the moment of maximum pressure occurs much later into the event. In fact, it's called tantric. When you squeeze someone to say I love you, the moment of maximum pressure is about 2/3 or almost 0.618 into the duration of the event. It's late. You'll never squeeze someone to say I love you where the maximum pressure is right away in the squeeze. That's not a love hug. And it doesn't work. People don't feel a tingle. But if you're squeezing someone to say you love them and you wait till about 2/3 of the way into the hug, it works better. And there's a reason.
Yeah, but let me try to get it. So, if you love one, now does this also go for Cassius Clay hitting someone that the maximum pressure comes at about the golden mean after he starts?
Well, actually, no. That's exactly the right question. But what we find is the touch, for example, that says anger.
Yeah.
The moment of maximum pressure comes 1/7 into the duration of the touch, which is maximum destructive interference, which could be very useful if you were kicking money changers out of a temple. So you were intentionally creating destructive interference.
Again, so you see a relationship between emotions, like anger or happiness or whatever, joy, and
proportion.
Geometrical proportions.
Exactly, yes.
Wow.
Yes.
So there is a link between what happens in here, what I feel, and the world of ideas.
Yes. Well, and more specifically, we could ask the question then, what is emotion accomplishing electrically or musically? Why would, when Manfred Klein took this all over the world, he did it in Polynesia, it was featured in the What is Music series in Nova, and this language of emotion was global. So there's something archetypal, needful being accomplished by the fact that we all instinctively learn these ratios in order to I mean, you can sit next
to... Bach, let's assume he knew that. He didn't work it out.
Right.
Although he did, in his fugas had a certain mathematical order. But every musician, all through times, the overtone singers from Tibet or Mongolia, knew this. Yes?
Well, Manfred Klein started to do this because he really wanted to figure out why only sometimes people would cry when he played the violin. And he figured it out. He learned. Because when you create, it's this called envelope to carrier wave ratio, where the violin string is vibrating at a particular wavelength, right? It's a pure tone, a sine wave. And yet, when you touch the violin string, if you do this little, you can see this in the camera. It's called massaging the envelope. So the musician calls it adding rubato. Yeah. What you're doing to massage the envelope is you're adding these ratios, and what do the ratios do?
It means that we have these electronic synthesizers these days. Is there a trick to say, okay, now we want to add some crying emotion here? Yes.
But actually, Manfred Klein offers that on his website, literally, the software to optimize your music.
Wait a moment, you're taking the wonder out of this. How can scientists like you come to the point that what we believed was outside the realm of science, emotions, and us, and you've brought it into mathematical proportions and ratios.
I'd like to mention that since we do believe that golden mean ratio harmonics relate to feeling compassion and love, that seems real. But the other thing we've noticed is you can't fake it. It's impossible to generate that harmonic in your heart if your heart is not blissful. It's a lie detector in a certain way. And what that means
But can you train it? Well, is that what say, if you go to the monastery, they make you sing like, day and night, they sing you. Does that make your system?
Yes, no, and that's part of my hypothesis or idea, I guess you could say, is that emotions are learned just like digesting. And what you're digesting by emoting are magnetic fields. And how you're digesting them is you're learning the process of massaging them so they can be squeezed between frequencies. And what happens is when the squeezing gets really good, compression becomes perfect. And we call that compassion.
Oh, wait a moment. You say that this feeling of being in tune with everything, and that's, I think, is a literal...
Yes.
...means we are actually in tune with the frequencies that make up our body and our reality.
Yes, and more specifically, I'm saying that when you experience this golden ratio cascade, when this nest of donuts you saw the picture of properly, that what happens is they can all fall into the same center and compress perfectly. Well... Is that now? Some people have these experiences they call unitive experiences. Yes.
At one time, and I've had at some times, I must say, not in Amsterdam, sitting here under the lights of a studio, but sitting on the mountain. Sometimes you have this feeling: I'm one with everything.
Yes.
The barriers fall down. You become one with everything. There is no separation anymore.
Yes.
Now, this is a very blissful feeling, and you want to hold on to it, and sometimes you can.
I totally agree with that description, and I simply believe now we're very close to adding an electrical description which has great rigor and meaning to exactly what you just described. I call it charge density. And the reason it's important to have an electrical description is that helps us make it teachable and shareable. In computers, if you want to know how to compress something perfectly, they say use fractal data compression. I don't know if we need to talk about what is a fractal. I think
fractal, let's say you have many theories about how certain waves are. You can build them up from sine frequencies, but there's another way. And then you use the theory of fractals, which is 1 divided by x plus 1 or something like that. And you get these very funny shapes. And it turned out to be a good way to code and compress information.
Yeah, and let's use just a very simple image that people could visualize very quickly. A fern tree. In a fern tree, the shape of the tree is the same as the shape of one branch, which is the same as the shape of one leaf, which is the same
a Christmas
as...
tree,
yeah,
basically. Yeah,
a fern, you know?
Yeah.
And so the fern tree was the first fractal in a certain way of thinking about it. That's called self-embedded, where a little piece of it is the same as the shape of the whole thing. And that's just what you said a minute ago about the golden mean ratio. It turns out the golden mean ratio is the principle of perfect self-embedding and perfect fractal making.
So the proportions,
yes,
the relationship between also between very small and very big is this golden mean.
Yes. Well, it's the perfect way to compress anything. Now, why would we go to so much trouble to describe perfect compression when we're talking about the nature of love? If I'm sitting here and I want to feel what's in you inside of me, and I as an electrician, and I am an electrician, believe that emotions can be described electrically as well, then that means the field effect, the electricity, the shape of magnetism of your feelings need to have a space inside me. Now, how do I make space inside me for the feelings of lots of other people? The answer is compression. Perfect compression means the data becomes infinitely information.
Small.
Well, it also becomes infinitely...
In other words, you make sure that your ratio...
Yes, is embeddable.
So we tune out. We make this... Well, we're not talking about sound, but maybe about electrical wave. We make sure that they are compatible.
Well, let's go back to your one with everything moment. So there you were on the mountain, and you felt this presence. Now, chances are, were you rather still at that moment?
Oh, yes, you could say so, yeah.
Yeah. Did it feel maybe like you were kind of almost held in a vice in a certain way? Or, rapture, rapt?
Yeah, there's all kinds of words for that. For me, it was more like slowly the boundaries were going.
Yeah.
Yes, I didn't felt contained anymore by things in the mind in the first place, but also the bodily containment kind of dissolved.
What happens with perfect embedding based on golden mean ratio is wavelength A can add and multiply with wavelength B, 0.618, 1, 1.618, 2.618. That cascade, it looks like a caduceus, like the symbol of the medical profession. That cascade can go on forever. So more waves of different wavelengths can come to one point than in any other way. So you have this, it's called perfectly multiply connected topology, but it's really simply about perfect connectivity. It's the perfect way for a field to be unified. It's the only way all the waves can come to one point and share spin. And that is called spin density or charge density, which is identical with what you felt, which I call bliss.
Gee, you defined God as a set of numbers.
Well, what you see, the set of numbers is the ratio. It's like you could say.
Well, there's nothing wrong with that. Isn't that what the Kabbalah is all about?
Well, it's called assume the position. You could say humorously, but if you look at it in terms of the physics of what might be called rapture, if two people are on the park bench, and one is willing electrically to get into the geometry of embedding, they would experience no heat during compression, like a solar flare, for example. Whereas if the other person is on that park bench and really wants to feel separateness, so I don't want to feel the person next to me and I have lots of barriers and membranes and compartments and secrets, that person is going to create electrical resistance to spin and feel heat. So the solution to becoming charge dense and therefore shareable is this perfect embedding, which we've discovered in the heart.
So teach yourself to get into the right frequencies. Now, we know that for healing, for instance, you can go to a doctor, get a shot of this or that, but there is another way of healing where people lay up hands or connect. Mm-hmm. When you read about that or experience that, there is usually a feeling of that in order for that healing to happen, you have to tune into each other, yes?
Right.
Really become one, and then sometimes it helps. Not it's unpredictable, but it sometimes works. Mm-hmm. Is that the same thing, that you tune in to the same?
Yes. It's for example, when they used the mind mirror, which used brain waves, the moment when major kind of tumors would melt and other things would happen. It would invariably happen at the moment that the brain harmonics of the healer and the person they were touching matched.
Yeah. So you're talking about, say, brain machines or machines that measure the frequencies of your brain, which you can do on the outside with little electric things, and then you can see them on the screen.
Yes.
You call that the mind mirror. That's one of the machines that does that. Indicates when you're in this state of bliss.
Well, it indicates when you're embedded. What it's called, if you were an electrician, you'd say phase locked or impedance matched. The point is that using the same harmonics but looking at the heart, we find we have almost, you could say, the ultimate marriage counseling tool. It's true.
Come on, guys, get hooked up. You on the machine, I on the machine, and we just have to tune in. Isn't now the fact that we are not tuned in all the time to each other, and the difference there, isn't that the fun of life? That you are a little bit different from me, so I have a little bit different energy, and we're not all in this bliss state.
Well, it's actually quite appropriate that we should have imagined that we were separate, because during that time we harvest memory. We gather. I call it, have you harvested any memories for the galactic core today? So we harvest something from imagining separateness, which is useful. But then there's a time when you say, well, and usually it's the time when cultures switch from patriarchy to matriarchy, which is the 13,000-year turn of the solar system and the galaxy. But it's
we're going to talk about that later.
Well, but anyway,
at major times in history,
yes,
we can see that happening.
So we turn a corner, and when matriarchy returns, we end the atomic or Adamic or hard-making age, and we turn to the Yeva or wet-making or matriarchy. And during that time, then, we need to discover again this principle of perfect embedding. You might say, e pluribus unum, the only mechanism which would allow many to become one would be this particular geometry, which is teachable in the heart.
Now, there are societies who says, yeah, that's nice. We do have these 13,000 or 21,000 cycles, but they're not us. They're the universe. They are the stars. There's the planets that forces. There's people that say that we are, again, now with this solar flare intensity, that it's the last sign before the year 2012 change. But people relate that to things happening in the sky, not things happening here.
Well, the way the model about the compression versus the rarefying, the packing versus unpacking, where packing is seed-making or male, and unpacking is egg-making or female or fractal, came from this idea that the solar system is moving with respect to the galactic plane, which is like a flying saucer, and in the 26,000-year precessional cycle, our movement with respect to that plane looks like an egg. And so for 13,000 years we go with the wind, and for the other 13 we go against the gravity wind. And so the Doppler shift is an unpacking and then a packing. And so as we turn that corner...
Okay, in simple words, you say, yes, there is reasons in the sky why this happens.
Yes.
Are we close to the end of a 13,000-year cycle?
Well, the nature of... First of all, clearly our metabolism is regulated by the sun's timing. So to embed, we need to embed in the timing of the sun, which was the center of the Mayan calendar. Now the Mayan calendar, as you mentioned, suggests a kind of termination point.
Big thing, 2012.
Yes, precisely. Yes. And yet, also the centerpiece of that Mayan calendar was the map of the I Ching, which turned out to be the codons of DNA, which the Mayans put there because it was a map of the pattern of the solar flares. So in
this year we happen to have a major solar flare activity,
and that's the point.
In Holland don't see it yet because there's much rain, but I understood it's the lowest barometer pressure for 150 years, and we had the hottest day, and the world is in turmoil.
I'm really glad you used the word pressure, because that is the point. It appears that the sun is actually speaking magnetic donuts. And the shape of those magnetic fields is the symmetry, literally, of the codons of DNA. And right now, the sun is pressuring us to see how much magnetic flux density we can absorb non-destructively. Because if we respond to pressure by becoming what's called scale invariant or compressible, then suddenly we become more spin dense, and we can participate in this dance of gravity which planets experience erotically. And so
because then things change.
Well, so really to participate in this kind of rapture experience, the skill of withstanding compression non-destructively is survival related. And so this
this is a lot of stuff. What you basically say, this body is based upon frequencies, which have ratios. Golden
Right.
mean, gouden snede is one of them. That happens to be all over the place.
It makes us compressible.
It makes us compressible. This body can relate not only to the sky, but also to other people by trying to get into this right compression mode. But we're also influenced by all kinds of other compression schemes around us, which we call sun, patterns, whatever. And you say that those old guys, like the Mayans, must have had some understanding about it. And I've seen in your work that you have picked up all kinds of objects from all over the world that kind of prove that these old guys were into geometry and relationships and ratios. Yeah?
Well, I think one of the sayings of the Mayans, and maybe this is credited to Jose Argüelles, was unless the indigenous or old ones' dream spell was alive and awake in symmetry space, we would be blown away in the magnetic wind of the sun.
Well, I'll repeat that again.
Unless the old ones, the indigenous peoples, dream spell, which is literally the field effect cast when you create this coherence, you see, unless it's alive and awake in symmetry space, Earth would be blown away in the magnetic wind of the sun. And so here we have...
Wait a moment. So you're saying that what the Australians call the mind... what is it?
The wormhole, the song line.
No. The dreamscape.
The dream spell.
The dream space, the spells where spells are cast, where magic happens.
Yes.
Is in fact a symmetric necessity for this reality to happen. If this wouldn't happen, if that dream space didn't happen, we wouldn't happen.
I'm saying...
So the two, and then I come to what now physics say. They say, aha, wait a moment. You need something called consciousness, or whatever you call it, to keep this whole thing together. Otherwise there would be no matter, there would be only energy, there would be nothing tangible. But there's something which we cannot describe.
No, we can describe it. We can describe it very accurately. We know exactly what happens.
Yeah, but in Heisenberg's terms.
No. In very simple terms that you can understand for yourself. When the Aboriginal sent their emotion down what they called a song line, and David Peat in the physics literature relates that explicitly to wormholes, the Aboriginal created this self-embedding, this recursion, which literally made centering force. And that's the key word, make centering force. That ability to implode lights the fire, and that's the glue. Just what you just said, consciousness holds things together. We understand exactly what happens. You learn how to make electrical implosion, and that creates the suction to center, which incidentally, literally, is how capacitance makes gravity. You arrange charge to be fractal, it implodes, we call that gravity. So you're literally, if you can't make your own gravity, you ain't going to hang in there when the sun burps.
Good. So, we need people, we need this other space. But who is there apart from these Aboriginal guys and you and me and our dreams and some magician? And is that other space, that consciousness space, that wave, that magical space, is that... are there demons there? Are there guys that are playing with other frequencies? Frequencies that would not make us get into that bliss state?
Well, let's take a specific example. You've mentioned magic several times. A favorite fellow of mine is John Dee, who I believe was the teacher of Francis Bacon, who wrote Shakespeare, who was trying to prove that Queen Elizabeth was his mother. But that's another story. But
is this the same guy that they claim actually wrote the pieces for
yes,
Shakespeare?
Exactly.
And he wrote, as far as I know, one play about the alchemic...
Yes.
Experience.
Yes. And so Francis Bacon was quite a whiz. Well, it turns out, John Dee, who taught Francis Bacon. Now, John Dee spoke most of the languages of the planet of his day. He had 10 times more books than the library at Cambridge. He was a whiz. And he said, well, gee, I really want to talk this. I want to learn how to speak the angel language. So an Ophanim angel knocks on his window, hands him a green stone, which is in the British Museum today. If you looked at it with even a little bit of clairvoyance, you saw these magnetic shadows, the same way Joseph Smith saw the Mormon tablets. And when you saw the magnetic shadows, he wrote down the shape of them, and that became the Ophanim alphabet called the Enochian keys, or Enochian physics, or the keys of Enoch, the true keys. And that became the Order of the Golden Dawn, the most high magic on the planet today, which was literally the alphabet of this family of angels. Well, guess what? That alphabet was used to make the movie Stargate, because that's how you squirt magnetism into black holes. And that alphabet has the symmetry.
I had the feeling that the things we dream up, and
Yeah.
cyberspace is an example, but also this wormhole and how we can travel to space, must have some relationship to reality, or something we can make, because it pops up in the books first, and then seemingly science reinvents it. Or are we making it? Is our consciousness changing reality so that wormholes do exist?
Well, it's more like when you look at something, if you create a hologram in your optical cortex, Carl Pribram's book, and yet if the hologram inside your head has enough in common with the hologram outside your head, I like to joke that matter is a hologram with a weight problem, okay? But if the hologram inside your head has enough in common, or self-embedded with, or in phase with the hologram outside your head, then they begin to share spin, morphic resonance.
And stuff happens out there.
Well, it's called psychokinesis, basically.
Yeah, but so this is magic. Magic is
that's right.
What
That's magic.
happens in your mind. Yes,
Yes.
I teach lessons in magic here. So it happens in your mind,
Mm-hmm.
and if you project it in the world and you give it the right energy, and not fighting against other influence, it might materialize.
And yet,
not like maybe a cup or something like that, but that's the ultimate magic. But things do happen.
well,
Yeah.
and let's make this again as practical as we can. If most young children who have a reasonable amount of twinkle in their eye, if they find a nice white fluffy cloud, ask permission, and focus in it, they can make a hole in it. It's very common, right?
Dear people, I'm very glad that Dan Winter tells you, this was what I started my lessons in magic, that we can make clouds go away. And it's very simple.
It's very simple. And this was talked about in the orgone literature, Trevor Constable, Weather Engineering in the High Seas, and we know exactly the principle. The fact is that...
What is the principle?
The principle is very simple. The only thing that ever let vapor become a droplet was the seed of perfect symmetry for how the waves could converge non-destructively.
Yeah.
So electrically, what is conscious focus? But exactly that. So yes, they could do it with these pipes columnated.
So you say by thinking about it, you
No,
create...
but not just thinking. You have to pour in the amperage of glandular emotion, because you have this template, the thought. But what gives it amperage is the feeling. That's why
So, and when you say kids can do it very easily, and some adults can do it, I can do it very easily. Yeah. But now the funny thing is, I'm trying to do that, and I have 50 people there, and it doesn't work. Why not?
Mm-hmm. Well, you will often see it happening rather spontaneously over children dancing blissfully barefoot in the mud, or if you have a yoga camp where there's lots of bliss. But if you have even the slightest skeptical audience, or another thing that drastically affects your ability to do it, is you need to be in a place where the magnetism is at least a little bit sacred. So there's that imploding magnetic force to give you leverage. So
there are conditions.
Yeah.
But this is what I did a few weeks ago together with Hans Plomb, who is a little magical guy in town. And he said, hey, it works. How do you do that?
Cool.
And then I tried to do it with 50 people, and it doesn't work. So magic is related to,
collective emotion. If the 50 people had been feeling an emotional experience together, but they probably, if you had...
No, everybody were skeptics there. Say, hey,
there you
can
go.
Do it. And
that's it. Yeah.
So magic happens if we all believe in it.
But let's give an example of how we could apply that principle to a global emotion, which could be survival related for a planet. We have this vision called harmonic module, where you would link up the hearts around the planet. Because it's actually been published in the literature. It's a friend, I think, it's Bernie... I wish I could remember his last name. But he did this publishing where he showed that the solar flare patterns changed several times dramatically at the moment when millions of children around the planet sang at the same moment.
Yeah. Now, I remember that the Roman Catholic Church had a system for that. They had days, time during the day, say 12, Angelus, where they ran the clocks and, they had this organized.
Yes.
And they all had prayer, and we would all share that. Now we do it on television, and I think there's too many skeptics around it, so it doesn't work anymore. But so you're saying that we do have the power to change reality rather drastically. And take an example of these ozone layers. Do you think we could replenish them if we all thought about it?
Actually,
if we all, in your terms, if we all made our ratios of feeling and electrical things, tune into that and make it happen?
The actual device we're using currently is called the HeartLink, and the new software of the new version will be designed to allow thousands of people at once to embed their hearts on the internet. So yes, absolutely.
Wait, are you saying synchronizing the heartbeat?
Yes.
Now, wait a moment. I can hold your arm for 15 hours. Does that synchronize my heart with yours? A little bit, maybe.
Frequently, if lovers touch, and they're at all tantric, they do spontaneously. But frequently also in emotional experience that bonds them happens first. So
you have to sing, like Gregorian chanting in a monastery. We all sing at the same time. We harmonize.
Well, yes, and then
meditation, and so on.
So clearly we have the power to create collective global centering force using heart harmonics. But
this is old stuff. The transcendental meditation, people tell this for ages.
Well, it is true, but at least now we have a rather rigorous but elegant geometrical model to understand how self-embedding creates the gravity that holds the atmosphere. More specifically, what we now understand is that...
Again, what you say is we have a geometrical, which is a mathematical explanation or description of what we know that happens for a long time, because that's why we have churches and pyramids and all these magical forms and all these things all through the ages. So you're not a scientist. You're a magician, but you put it in numbers.
No. I'm saying that you arrange charge, a capacitor, so its layers are fractals, self-embedded, which is a pure mathematical equation for self-embedding. If you do that, you make gravity. I'm saying further that when you do that with your heart, and collective emotion feeds the earth in explicitly that way, so that if you arrange your magnetic lines to be fractal, it's pentagonal shapes, repent and be saved, that what you actually do is the same thing you do in your heart when it blossoms magnetically. You make that charge fractal implode. You make a little bit of gravity. And that's how eventually it was called planet taming by this family.
Well, we've done that. There were times we had to do it, and what was it, the harmonic convergent? Reyes did that. We interviewed him a while ago. No, that was fine, and when he said that the world will disappear in 2012, and Terence did so too, Terence McKenna, but now Terence is dead. So what's happening? What I noticed today is that the world is at a heat wave, so to speak. Well, we have a very strange situation, and you were implying that that's related to
charge compression. I'm saying
predictable charge compression.
Yes.
To predictable ratios and
to the need for biology to become able to create the centering force to squirt through literally the heart of the sun.
Okay. Put my other pad on and say I'm a cynic. Mr. Winter, you're on this for how many years? 20 years?
A long time.
And you're actually not the only one in the world who sees these things. Why haven't you made it to Nobel Prizes or big machines? I mean, I'll give you an example of one person who believed in orgone, Reich, and he made machines, and he could make clouds go away or even appear or whatever, a rainmaker. I think they burned his book at the last time of his life. They put him in jail, and he died miserably.
So it's a tradition among us.
Stay away from Dan Winter because it's going to be cold.
But my suggestion is understand for yourself what gravity is.
But even if I understand it, how come that your message has reached, even through your website and so limited number of people?
Well, the golden mean ratio has been around for a while, and the ability to feel the bliss has been around for a while. A mathematical and electrical description of the nature of bliss as being the same of charge density is so simple it's actually self-evident. I was invited...
But why does it happen? Why does someone like Rupert Sheldrake comes out with a similar, not the same theory, but a theory that says basically the same? He said there are fields, morphogenetic fields, that are between us.
But they're all leading to exactly the same thing.
Yeah, they're leading to the
he said morphic resonance perfected is self-embedding. Yeah. And Schauberger said vorticity perfected is self-embedding. So if I learn how to embed myself in any wave system, then I can begin to steer it. And that's how I inhabit it.
But why doesn't it happen? Then that's what I'm trying to ask.
As soon as we understand it, will happen.
Yeah, but Rupert Sheldrake wrote a book, I think now 10 years ago or 8 years ago, and I got a copy with his name in it. I said, look, this is going to change the world. 7 experiments that would change the world, which were related to these fields, these morphic resonances, these golden mean embedding processes that you're talking about. Thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people have read the book. Tens of thousands have done the experiment, and the world hasn't changed.
I think the actual moment of change comes when large numbers of people can enter bliss together.
And that's what Transcendental Meditation movement also says.
Well, I mean, the Sufis turn and the Shakers shake and the Quakers quake, and any tradition that could teach bliss to their kids did not have a drug problem or a problem with their immune system. But we are not able to teach our kids bliss. So until we understand that the function of DNA is to make bliss, because that's the only thing that gives you a squirt gun out of here. It gets the inertial...
But then you come in a very philosophical question. Why would God have created a world with the only purpose to bring it back to that bliss, oneness?
Well, one doesn't need to talk about God as something outside oneself. All one needs to do is to look at the pure principle of how you connect with everything by turning inside out inside yourself. And at that point, you actually have that connectivity device for yourself. And at that point, you really are able to plant that seed in anyone you look at. Because you radiate that feeling. It's quite real.
You have defined sainthood in mathematical terms, or what?
I think, in a way, yes. But again,
but I have this little poem that says, "Who am I but my friends in me?
Exactly, yes.
Who are they but the friend in me?" That we understand, yes?
Precisely.
It's projection, and who are they but a friend? And when I say the frequency in me, you would still agree, or the ratio. But then, what about my enemy? Who is he? Who is she in me?
But it's like...
Wait a moment. We understand that, God, whatever, bliss. But there's so much shit out there. There's war, there is whatever. What about the enemy in me? About the fact that I don't share this bliss, that I don't share this embedding, this process of tuning in with you?
Well, I think the principle
where does that come from?
Is that anything that will not self-embed will self-cancel. So you wouldn't really need to focus on what is your enemy or what is anger. All you need to do is focus on what is shareable, and everything else will not survive as a wave. So
but is it there? Does it exist? Are there frequencies, ratios that are related? Like we have the golden means. Is there a ratio out there that is like evil? The 666 of the magical guys?
Evil is just live spelled backwards. And live means L into the I of phi, turning L into the I focus of phi recursion. So the mirror image of that would be simply to turn away from embedding is the only definition evil has ever had. So
not aiming at the ultimate embedding or bliss or togetherness, oneness is evil.
Yeah, let me try my little poem on you. Can I give you a little?
Yes.
Okay, very short poem. The poem is, since only love bends the light, only love creates.
Since only love bends the light, only love creates.
We talked about how when you feel this bit of bliss in your heart, you create a little suction, right? So you tempt that. Remember we talked about the wave in a line is called energy. A wave in a circle is called mass because it's stored inertia. So whatever sucked that wave from the line into the circle, bent the light, right, is the creator.
Okay. Well, this was a interesting but for some people maybe a little bit way out discussion about frequencies and ratios and how we can translate emotions into mathematical, geometrical terms. And but I think the main thing of your message is still that between knowledge and wisdom, what do you think is between wisdom and knowledge?
Bliss.
Oh, I think it's love.
Same thing.
If you add love to to knowledge. And let me end with one of my poems. Wisdom is not knowing, but feeling the truth.
Oh.
I'm only different because I have not yet learned to be the same. Frequency.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Dan Winter.
Thank you, Luc.